FutureDad 40. The West can only focus on secondary issues. Quote, two strategies for coping, the way of avoidance or the way of attention. Marlon Ferguson. My kitchen is full of knives. Standard knives for eating with, sharper serrated ones purely for steak, chopping knives for big slabs of meat, long curved bladed knives, apparently called chef's knives, for preparing salad. Even though I'm not a connoisseur of knives, and I'm certainly not a foodie, there are many knives in my kitchen. Detectoring. Now, I hear all the time about the knife crime epidemic in London. At 18 offences per 10,000 people, there are 3 times the offences as any other police force in England. This is against the backdrop of a 70% increase nationally in knife crime offences from 2015 to 2024. So it's both bad in absolute terms and much worse than anywhere else. So far, so expected. Given the scale of this problem and the over 24 knives in my kitchen, I'm pretty sure that, by the law of averages, some of them must have been involved in a serious criminal offence. I therefore decided to probe which of my knives have been involved in violent crime. I took each of my kitchen knives out individually, set up my own interview room with a sign on the door saying, "Quiet please, investigation in process," and began to ask some probing questions. I became quite impatient with some of them, thumping my fist on the table, berating them that their silence was unacceptable. But alas, after several hours of intense interrogation, they did not implicate themselves or each other. I can only conclude that none of them were involved in any knife crime in London. Not one of my knives have been involved in a random attack or a senseless murder. They all just sort of sit there, waiting to be used to cut some lovely cheddar cheese or juicy pork belly. Assuming my amateurish detecting skills were at fault, I asked a friend to cross-reference his knives' whereabouts with local instances of crime. I've been in his kitchen and I know he has as many knives as me. A similar rigorous interview process began. Accusations were made, fingers were pointed. Surely one of his sharp, threatening, vicious-looking blades must have done something criminal. Hours later, the results were also negative. Apparently not one crime was committed by my friend's knives either. What is going on here? Secondary issues. There are many things wrong with Western civilization. I've written about this in several essays, including FutureDad 17, Britain is Already Socialist, FutureDad 32, The Fertility Rate Crisis as One Cause, and FutureDad 33, How and Why the UK Will Collapse. In this essay, before talking about primary causes, I will first talk about the limp-wristed attempts to tackle the cause by deliberately not tackling the cause. The West, by which I mean Western governments, but also crucially Western society, seems only capable of addressing or attempting to address secondary issues. Back to knives. You've heard about my diligence in rooting out criminal steak knives in my kitchen. It was, in fact, a painstaking search. Am I the only one interrogating and trying to shine a spotlight on these dangerous weapons? No, fortunately I have comrades in this campaign. The government and police are singularly focused on it too. Commander Stephen Clayman, National Police Chiefs Council lead for knife crime, said in September 24, knives are far too accessible, with online sellers being a key focus of our work over the last year. Key focus. So you see, as long as we get more knives banned, locked up and put in prisons, etc., then we will have less of this ghastly knife crime, especially if available online. Apparently this is a cause for concern on its own. The Southport massacre in July 2024 was committed by a previously convicted Muslim from Rwanda. He was arrested before for a prelude offence to the one in which he murdered 3 innocent girls and injured 6 others. After the atrocity, the headline was "Tougher Checks on Knife Sales, Fast-Tracked After Southport Attack." So to our collective relief, our anointed political leaders and legislators made concerted efforts to put more knives behind bars, rather than, say, knife attackers or murderous anti-white Muslims on a watch list. So, are there any other situations where one seemingly obvious thing is repeatedly being done to deter a thing which will not deter that thing at all? Yes. You see, the West has become tragically obsessed with turning its eye of Sauron away from the root cause, or even the neighbouring cause, and turning instead on first and second order effects. Furthermore, left-wing talking points are most socially acceptable, so the guilty political class have no trouble at all convincing their lackeys in the media to discuss and broadcast fake solutions only. Let's break down this and two other situations with the corresponding real solution. Problem: mass knife crime in British cities. Pretend cause: anthropomorphic knives. Real cause: savage, Occupy Muslim combatants and fatherless Afro-Caribbean men with a gang culture mindset. Real solution: deploy the Navy to steadfastly defend the sovereign UK from all invaders, deploy all foreign-born criminals, and if complicit, their families to their ancestral home. Cease all benefits paid to non-natives. End all immigration from Muslim and third world countries. End the family court system to reduce fatherless homes. End the Equality Act, HRA, and the ECHR. End all policing of free speech and non-crime incidents, and divert those resources to policing the streets. Problem: mass organised gang rape of children across dozens of English towns. Pretend cause: men. Real cause: Pakistani Muslim gangs with an anti-white Islamic supremacist mindset. Real solution: deploy the Navy to steadfastly defend the sovereign UK from all invaders, deport all foreign-born criminals, and if complicit, their families to their ancestral home. Sentence enablers in the police, social work, media and politics to lengthy prison terms. Deport all Muslims with any criminal record to their ancestral home. Cease all benefits paid to non-natives. End the Equality Act, HRA and the ECHR. End all immigration from Muslim or third world countries. Ban cousin marriage, blasphemy laws, mosques, halal, Sharia courts and niqabs to encourage self-deportation of violent anti-Western cultures. Problem: litter. Pretend cause: not enough bins or not enough eco-friendly packaging. Real cause: third world, high-time preference mindset. And liberal crime policies. Solution: deploy the Navy to steadfastly defend the sovereign UK from all invaders. Cease all unearned benefits paid to non-natives. Divert resources from welfare to street beautification. End all immigration from Muslim and third world countries. Increase the punishment for littering. Deport any non-native found guilty of any crime above a parking ticket to their ancestral home. All of these can happen if there is a will to do so. The problems facing Britain and the West in general are a choice. A choice. Our political leaders inflict us upon the native population. They will continue to lie and gaslight that they did, just because a reckoning would be very painful for them if we lived in a sane, just society. See my essay, FutureDad 38, Why Did the Elite Lie About Everything? The foundational motivation and thus the solution to this is very clear. In 2024, the Labour Prime Minister Starmer said, quote, "The previous government, the Tories, were running an open borders experiment and turned Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders." His right-hand buttock, Tory party leader Kemi Badenoch, said that there had been a, quote, "collective failure of political leaders from all parties over decades." They say that very clearly, probably the only slither of truth to come from their traitorous mouths in the 21st century. But nothing happens. There is no punishment for this, no reckoning. They say the reasons out of one side of their mouth, then they promulgate fake causes out of the other. They fear actual justice if they make the obvious connection out loud to the masses to finally take notice, to finally switch off Sky Sports or the Great British Bake Off, to halt their nation's assassination. Rely on a lie. In all, there are 5 reasons in total why an empire of lies has been painstakingly built around fake causes. 1. They created the original problem. 2. It's embarrassing. 3. They benefit from the continuation of the problem. 4. Identifying the cause makes the paymasters look bad. 5. To create the appearance of valiant effort. Let's go through them. 1. They created the original problem. If you create a problem, then a few years later point to the direct, devastating consequences and say, that right there, that's the obvious consequence, traceable back to the action we took, then it means they are culpable. That leads to consequences, not only for society, but especially for them this time. People tend not to like losing their pensions and going to jail. 2. It's embarrassing. Imagine you're an anti-knife campaigner like Stephen, spine donor, Clayman, and someone points out at a dinner party that knife crime keeps going up, despite all attempts to arrest the knives involved. You'd look pretty stupid. You'd look like you don't know what you're doing. You're unlikely to be invited to many more dinner parties in Pimlico or Islington. 3. They benefit from the continuation of the problem. Imagine you're on the commission to rid the London of knife crime. Say someone like Stephen, spine donor, Clayman. He has a high profile, a position of power. It's not great for your career when there is no longer any significant knife crime, and it's stopped for a reason which was nothing to do with your hilarious campaign. You're going to look like a grifter who has milked a tragic situation for personal gain for years, aren't you? 4. Identifying the cause makes your paymasters look bad. Imagine, say, that knife crime was revealed to be predominantly caused by men aged 13 to 25 with Afro-Caribbean heritage. In a sane society, they were all deported, Britain stopped paying benefits to these communities and ended all immigration from these regions. Then, the NGOs, the politicians, charities, think tanks, corporate donors, and media activists who fostered this malfeasance, sometimes by donation and resources, sometimes just by lying by omission, would all look very, very bad. They might then face social and other consequences for that. They don't want that either. 5. To create the appearance of valiant effort. The elite's existence, despite their wealth and power, is still by consent. They maintain that by appearing to do something, by pointing to absolutely anything but the actual root cause. If anyone implies that they seem to be idly sitting by whilst knife crime becomes an everyday occurrence in previously safe neighbourhoods, they can point to their vehement anti-knife rhetoric and say, look, I really tried to do something, you guys. What if? Finally, what would Great Britain look like if there was a focused action and an end to cowardice regarding the persistent root cause? Unrecognisable in a very, very good way. Future Dad.